It's a warm day today. Yeah, days like today, I wish I could bottle it up and save it for like one of those really cold winter days. Today I got up, I went for a walk, I made breakfast, had a nice morning, and then I sat down to do this video. It's been about 4 months since I went part-time and starting to get a little bit of a routine, a little bit of a rhythm. And I was thinking about my day-to-day, and I realized that one thing that is super important besides a routine is kind of understanding your motivation. And what I mean is like what motivates you. So one thing that humans like to do is they like to group up or identify with a group. Evolutionarily speaking, this makes sense because it was a safety thing, safety in numbers. So nowadays you'll find where people identify as Texan or New Yorker, Republican or Democrat, Muslim or Christian, Knicks or Lakers. And again, it's just that part of our monkey brain that it feels good to be part of a group. But in a modern society, this doesn't always serve us. The problem is when we identify as a specific group, we kind of close ourselves off to everything else, or we see the alternatives as bad or wrong. And when we silo ourselves from all of that, we stop learning. And the moment in life that you stop learning, you stop growing, and you start dying. At that point, you are basically shriveling up and withering away. You have kind of given up on everything else in the world and decided this is it. Now, through lots of tests and science, they have identified that people who are more intelligent than the average person are the people who are open to new ideas or willing to change their mind when presented with new information. And this is not something you need to be a genius to do. It is something you can learn to do. And so a different way I've found to approach it is every year or so, I will just sort of sit down and kind of evaluate my values. Now, your values are the things that you care most about in the world. And that can seem like a very vague and overwhelming concept, but what somebody showed me once is this list of values. And I'll put it up on the screen so you can see it or screenshot it or whatever you want to do. And as you look this list over, you'll probably identify with many of them or list them as things that you value. Now, there's also some that you probably won't identify with as much. And so what you want to do is you want to just list the ones that you care about. Now, this is the tricky part. Once you've done that, the next step is to whittle it down to 8 to 10 things. And this is super hard. Once you start doing that, you start to notice that some of them are similar or in the same sort of vein. And so really thinking about, what does that mean to me? And is this more important than that? That's where you start to really get to the heart of what you care about. Once you have this list of 8 to 10 things, that's your focus. That's your lens to look at everything else through. And it's a much, much more holistic way of looking at your life or the world and deciding what you want to focus your time and energy on. If you're ever bored or conflicted or unmotivated, kind of reviewing this list gives you some ideas of where you should start looking. Now, I'd mentioned I did this a couple weeks ago, and where the magic happens is when you do it without looking at previous lists, and then you compare them. So I just did it again. I looked at the big list of values, went through and whittled it down, found my 8 to 10, and then when I looked at it compared to the one I did last year, there's subtle differences, subtle changes, and that is where you see yourself growing or where you see yourself changing. I'd mentioned last week that as you get older, you can look back at your life and see how you have evolved over time and how you've become a different person, but it's very difficult to imagine yourself turning into somebody else in the future. But this actually is like proof of it. A few years ago, one of the values I had was adventurousness, being adventurous. And when I was a little younger, besides camping, I would go backpacking just out into the middle of the national forest. I would go to places I'd never been before by myself and do a lot of solo travel. But this year, adventurousness was not on it. However, exploration was. Now, what's the difference? For whatever reason, when I looked at the list this year, exploration just resonated more than adventurousness. To me, adventurousness has a little bit more of a connotation of risk or sticking your neck out, where exploration feels a lot more safe and academic. Several years ago, I had accomplishment as one of the things on my list. But when I look at my list from last year, accomplishment is not there. However, fun or enjoyment was. And at one point, I really valued progressing in my company. I really valued checking things off of my to-do list. But now when I think about how I want to spend my time, I want it to feel good. A couple that are persistent from year to year to year are curiosity or learning and creativity. So those are things that, for whatever reason, are just kind of core to who I am. It's pretty interesting, really. And although I do struggle at certain aspects of life, I'm pretty good at organization, pretty good at planning, and I can compensate for other things by using those skills. In a future episode, I'll talk about how I actually kind of plan my week to week. Anyway, I hope you found that interesting. I will leave a list of the values down in the description. If you have any questions, leave a comment, please subscribe, and I will see you next time.